Come to start us. Hey, family, and welcome to episode number 9 of Critical Sense Making Sessions, facilitated by yours truly, Revolutionary Rika. Today's topic is the education of Black children. Today's guest is Mrs. Gina Fromer. She is a San Francisco native who is passionate about education, about universal childcare, and is standing in solidarity against hate, racism, and oppression everywhere. Gina, can you tell us a little bit more about who you are and one word to describe how you're showing up?
Good morning, everyone. Let's see, one word for me, how I show up. I would say empathetic. I mean, that word for me represents my leadership style. It represents how I show up, at home and my family, to, my leadership roles. And so I think I know for a fact that that's part of my emotional intelligence is empathy is my one word. I'm a down home girl. I grew up in Bayview Hunters Point. We used to call it West Point back in the day. Out of that poverty emerged someone who was resilient, someone self-determined to get their education so they can get out. And I remember my mom telling me, get your education so you can get out. I didn't know what she meant at the time. I thought she just meant out of the hood, but she really meant out of poverty. She meant changing your circumstances for your family going forward, especially growing up in generational poverty. So that's who I am. I wear who I am. I bring it with me to every conversation. I am unapologetically Black. I'm an African-American female who understands the history of who we were and who we are and where we want to go. And I stand for peace and justice. And as a mother and a grandmother, I want what's best for my kids and my grandkids and all children growing up in San Francisco, but all over the world. I started a foundation in Kenya called Circle of Care, and it basically incorporated 5 orphanages, probably about 500 kids that are supported every month. Didn't have anything, and we sent a little bit of something, and now they have a little bit more of books and things to educate themselves. So that empathy carries from where I grew up all the way to what I am doing in my career right now, as well as my volunteer work. So,
well, thank you for sharing out, and thank you for agreeing to come on and speak to our listeners. I want to bring up, I'm going to share my screen here and bring up a post from one of the pages I know that you're a moderator on. We believe Black Lives Matter California, #MU4BLM. And so if you could tell the viewers a little bit more about the page, and then also this post, voter suppression must be stopped. I'm just interested in hearing how you're seeing this show up. Like, what ways are they suppressing voting rights, and what people should be looking for?
right. I mean, this is a heavy topic for me, knowing the history of what we died and fought for, our ancestors, and how many shoulders we stand on when we're supposed to walk into that ballot box. I don't care if it's rain and storm, and my grandma would go, it meant something to her. She was born in 1906, so she didn't have the right to vote back in the day. And so she got suppressed by fear. She couldn't, she had a 6th grade education. So sometimes the literacy question came up. So those kind of things back in the day are carrying forward to today. And they're using technology. They're using our post office, the one sacred thing that Black people had to buy homes and educate their children with jobs in the post office. And now you're telling me you taking that too? It's just a fear game. We cannot not let this happen. And so it's interesting being in California. You almost feel like, you can't reach it. Like South Carolina, North Carolina, what's happening in Arkansas, what's happening in Georgia. You want to be there to say, no matter what, get there. And when you see these long lines of people, hours and hours have to wait, there's some intentionality around that. And I just think this is the most, terrible thing on our human rights. This is the most terrible thing on our political rights and his rights as Black people, Latino people. And it's pathetic how they want to control us through the vote. and I'll be damned if that's okay to happen. And so I, on my platform, I'm a co-administrator of Black Lives Matter platform on Facebook. I was asked to be there because, putting posts in and jumping into conversations and leading conversations on Black Lives Matter. And, I've been in some heated conversations. I've been in some very constructive conversations. And the reality is people are listening now more than they ever have. And if one thing we need to learn and build from this pandemic and what's happening in our country right now is that we got to move forward. Change and crisis has always pivoted the Black individual forward. And so we're going to use this opportunity to get our message out and to pivot to that next level of us getting another notch on that belt of societal rightness, right? That societal rightness that we need as a people. And I know we don't do it alone. There are a lot of friends and colleagues, white, Black, brown, Asian, who stand with this on this journey. Native Americans stand on this journey with us, because you know what? We know that civil rights, when it happened, it elevated everyone. The worker, the poor man, the white poor man, we all came together. And what's happening in our country right now is beyond control. And I know change needs to happen November 3rd.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing out. So I'm going to move us into the kind of first set of questions to frame the first part of our conversation. And so first, I would love for you to tell me about your life growing up in Bayview, Hunters Point in San Francisco.
Wow, I smile because I am doing my dissertation right now on African-American women who've emerged out of poverty and in a leadership role, significant leadership roles, like our Mayor London Breed, like many other individuals who came out of generational poverty. What was it? What were those variables that they contribute to their success? And so I want to elevate that. I want to elevate and map out of poverty, whether it's proverbial or something that can be used back in community, what you were doing, Rika, in your community center. What was it? And so out of that, I go backwards into Bayview Hunters Point, a community where we were all poor. We didn't know it. We were all poor. And there is a term called happy poverty. I don't like to say that because poverty is not happy. Not having your basic needs met, your human rights needs met, that's not happy. But being a child in poverty, I was happy growing up at 201 West Point, going out in the morning and coming back at sundown and having your mama come out with a belt when you're not coming home. And didn't mean it was just that fear factor, right? But we running home to have dinner, and whether it was mayonnaise sandwiches or chicken and whatever, there was food on the table. And sometimes I brought other friends with me because I know their mother wasn't home. And that the part of that village was there growing up. Mothers came out the door and said, you better go home. That made it feel like a place where I wasn't sad. I know we didn't have a lot, but I wasn't sad. And the piece of what I know that was critical for us growing up was my mother and my dad. My dad was, he was there, but he was a Rolling Stone, so he was around. But my mother, she was the first in her family to get an AA degree from City College. I mean, generational women, 6th grade education, and so on, and that. But they were homemakers, the seamstresses, cooks, in the kitchen, housekeepers. They did that hard work, so I can sit here today to tell their story. But coming out of generational poverty, and my mother making that marker on education, that point that she had books in the morning, she would read. She had cedar chest full of books. My grandmother read. We had books all the time. It was like, my mother, if she was sitting under a tree, she had a book with her. When we were playing, she had a book with her. So I knew that education as a young kid was important to my mother. And also the fact that on the Hill, I had 3 older sisters and brothers, and they went to a public school on the Hill. When we finally came, my three of the younger kids, she put us in Catholic school, All Hallows Catholic School, the only Catholic school on that side of town, on that area, and we bused to school. And so I didn't realize how important transportation is in poverty, to be able to access the outside, right? Because when you don't have a bus, or it's just one bus that gets you in and out, and you don't have really, it's not good access and it don't run on time, you forget that there's an outside world. And at a young age, I would have to walk to catch a bus to my school and get back on that bus to come home. So I became a navigator at a young age of my community. I began to see things outside of where I lived. And I also had an aunt that lives in Lakeview who worked for Rec and Park, and she was sort of middle class. They owned a home. So I would go over there because my cousin was the same age as I. So I got a chance to see a little bit outside of my community. And I knew that that was important, and how I think about the world, that it was bigger than just my community. And so as I embarked through my educational journey and education as far as Catholic school, and growing up with all the friends in the neighborhood and the people who could afford that $77 a month. It was a big deal back then, to send your child to school. My mom had 3 kids in school, and a lot of times she didn't eat. A lot of times we had an apple and a sandwich for lunch, because to her, making sure she can try to give us a better education was something she knew would pay off later. And so that's how I grew up. I love growing up in Hunters Point, and I will never forget those days.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing out. Second, thinking back on your educational journey as a Black girl, what were some of the highlights in your interactions with your teachers, your staff, and the administrators?
Yeah, I remember walking into the office in the morning, and because I had to catch the bus, a lot of times we were late. And Miss Kennedy was sitting there like, just go to class. She was African-American woman. So walking in and seeing a Black woman at the front desk, the first person that was greeting me, made a huge difference. And then I went to my teachers, and, some of my fondest memories of teachers are in my elementary school. Miss Valentino, Miss DeVera, I remember all of them. And I never felt like it was about race. I didn't feel singled out. I know we struggled to do some of the field trips and stuff because of money, but my mom made a way out of no way a lot of times. And so I think teachers that greet you, know your name, know your community, ask me about how my grandma's doing, how your dad, they know more than just your name. And my teachers knew we went to church together. We did bake sales together. Our families came together. That's where teachers were back in the day. They knew who you were, who your family was, and how you were kind of living in your community. And it was culturally competent around that direction. And later on, when I got to high school, I went to ICA, it's Immaculate Conception Academy in San Francisco. It was nuns, and that was different. They were not culturally competent. I have memories that are not so fond of some of those teachers who were nuns. But my favorite teacher in the whole wide world was Miss Gomez, a Latin woman. She was a lesbian, but she was the most fun, amazing woman in the world, and I have the most fond memories of her. So you latch on to that teacher that treats you well, and the one that says you can be anything you want to be, and that's what I had, teachers that cared about me. And I think we need to get back to that in our city. We need to get back to that where teachers know more than just your name.
Absolutely. Thank you. What was challenging outside of, I know you talked about the nuns and that being a little different. Was there any situations or incidents that were really challenging for you around that?
Absolutely. It was 8 Blacks in the whole school. Wow. I had to struggle to find people who look like me. And I'm coming out of Hunters Point. So I'm catching 3 buses to get to school in high school. And I get there and I have to adapt to a whole new culture. Mm-hmm. That wasn't my culture. It was European religion, and that guided me in some ways. A lot of ways, it was painful. It was painful that we had to assimilate in that way. And we did it because we were told that we wanted to get a good education and have more opportunity, but it was painful, and I get back on those 3 buses and go home to my hood where I felt at home. I felt welcome. I do my homework, because we have to do our homework, throw my stuff off, my uniform, and go down to the basketball court and see all my girls and my friends, and we, that culture that I needed was where I lived. And I would walk out of that every day and feel strange, in a strange land sometime. And it was hard. The first year in that school was really hard for me. But I knew I'm very spiritual, so I knew I had my faith and I had my God, and that didn't go away. And so that guided me, right? And that spirituality that as a young black girl that I grew up with was with me from day one. It was always here, kind of guiding my mistakes and my challenging my will and my choices. And a good, bad, or ugly, didn't matter. That's what that was there for me as a kid. But yeah, teachers were not always welcoming to me as a black girl growing up in that school. And but I pushed through, and that's where resilience comes in. If I had two words, resilience would be the other word for me. That psychological inside, there's internal and external factors, but that psychological resilient factor, that made it. Get on a bus, 3 buses every day. Wow, you are determined. A lot of days I don't want to get up, and my mother get up, get ready to go to school. It was a trek. And again, there's that transportation piece. Navigating your community. You're going through other micro communities. You're meeting people, hearing different languages, smelling different foods. How transportation helps to create a more diverse me, as far as how I accepted culture. I got out of my zone, and I went through a lot of other ones. And it was challenging, but I learned. I learned about communities that way.
Thank you. And so the last question in this first part is, how has your educational journey informed your professional journey?
Wow. I worked 14 years in the YMCA of San Francisco. I started out as a truancy case manager, ended up as a district vice president. Everything I did, at the core of it, was education and young people. Because I believe if you spend time further upstream with young people, they have a better chance to change their life circumstances. And that was so important to me. And it's been important to me as I embark on my journey now. I've been at the Children's Council as CEO for 19 months. And I tell you, I'm further upstream. I'm 0 to 5. I've gone from 0 to 99. But I'm in that zone of 0 to 5 because preschool, learning, love of learning, all of that reading is birthed in that preschool environment. And we know the parent is the primary teacher. So being able to support parents and families to be the best they can be for their children is what I've always been about. I have grandchildren myself, and I see how important a learning environment is, whether it's a parent and a child in a home, or that child is able to attend a facility. That learning is so critical in the choices that they make later on in life. And too many of our children of color don't have opportunity to get to quality situations. And so that's why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. And so it's led me here. From that moment my mother said, and my mother was a teacher for 36 years until she passed away. And she believed in education. She knew it would change our circumstances. And I have to say, all of my family, I got 4 siblings, my mother's children, 4 left, and all of us are out of poverty. And my children will never know how and what the sacrifices were that we made for them to be living out of poverty themselves right now. So that flip, one generation out, flip happened in my family. And I know it can happen in other families. And I'm determined to build that out in community.
Love it. Absolutely. That's awesome. So in our second set of questions, the first one is, what inspired you to work in education?
My mother. She was everything as far as that. She was an example. She pushed. She exposed us. My mom had 6 kids, and she knew it was a way out for us. I had my older sister, went to Washington High School. I don't remember one day my sister being in Baby Hunters Point. She used education. She was always volleyball, drill team, debate club. She wanted to be a lawyer. She was always at school. She used school education as a way out of the community at that time. She wasn't thinking about the future. She didn't want to be in the hood. And it didn't change who she was, as far as her values and what she believes in today. But what for her, exposure other places was important, and school gave her that. And my fear is that schools are not that anymore for our children, right? You don't want to go to school because you don't want to go to that teacher who puts you in the back of the class or doesn't know your name or really is not attuned to how you learn, right? And so I saw those examples growing up of one sister who didn't, hung out, and she didn't, education was important, to my other sister who it was really important. So I chose that path because I saw the exposure. And I want that for other young people. I want them to know that education is not for everyone, but for certain people, African Americans, education means that it's freedom. No one can take my degrees from me. And it doesn't make me a better person because I'm straight hood. I grew up in Hunters Point, and I use my hood in a boardroom. I use my hood in the classroom, and I use my hood in my kitchen with my kids. Okay. So my hood is used in good ways, and sometimes it's on that Black Lives Matter page. It's used in very revolutionary ways, right? Because I've seen it. So, I think education is a way out. And I got that from my mother because she said it all the time. You get your education so you can get out, get out.
Love it. Thank you. If you could suggest one thing that would empower Black students or would have empowered you as a student, what would it be?
I would say personal mastery. Let me explain that. Mastering something, whether it's chess, to a sport, to a chess club, to violin, challenge yourself a little bit to master something. Because what we've lost in my research that I'm doing now, a lot of what we've lost is seeing personal mastery happen. I saw my mother master being broke. She mastered going hungry and feeding her kids. She mastered putting us through school when she didn't have a lot. That's personal mastery. So we had examples of that across a lot of different zones. And I think because the Black family has been attacked and disrupted because of many errors of a lot of different things, that mastery piece, us seeing examples of mentors who are mastering, certain things. I want to do that. Look at them. They got through it. Figure out how to master something and challenge yourself, right? Don't just settle. And my thing is look for those examples around you, whether it's the pastor in the church who has a story to tell, whether it's Rika who got a story to tell, or whether it's the woman that you just met on the bus who you've been talking to for the past 3 weeks because you guys on BART together or bus or BART together. Ask them their personal story. Those things help us understand that, we have to push ourselves a little bit more. And this is unfortunate that Black people have to, we have to work double hard to get what we are. It's true. It's true. Whether you're in the boardroom or the classroom, you had to be the best in your class to get the things handled like you're supposed to. You just have to be the best at what you do. And that hasn't changed right now. And even with the whole Black Lives Matter movement, what I'm seeing, Rika, now is, yes, we're hiring more. You got one more here, you got one more there. I'm talking, we need like 10 more. Give me 10 more people that are doing this amazing work, not just the one more person you're deciding Microsoft to hire. I need 10. Give me 15. Create pipeline programs so people can come in there. I don't want to settle for just, using this crisis and getting the one more. We need more. So I firmly believe that young people today should look for mastery in their environments, begin to think about mastery in their own lives and challenge themselves to do things that they themselves have never done, whether it's going on a hike to, writing some memoirs for yourself. Just start writing, do that. I think personal mastery is a big deal. And the research shows, Rika, that in communities of poverty, personal mastery, education, positive role models, those three things can help children in poverty get out of poverty if they're in educational settings. But when those things don't exist, can you just imagine how those outliers come in and just, you know, and we get the results that we have, you know, 60% of our kids are not graduating from high school. And the data that we see, the daunting data around educational outcomes for Black children in California and across this country. Something different has to happen.
Absolutely. Thank you. What are some ways that educators can support kind of this, what you talked about, like creating space for those things to happen in our educational settings? And through that, how can they deepen their interaction with Black students?
Right. First, we need more Black teachers. I think Black teachers elevate not only Black children, they elevate other children as well, because they see this individual as a leader. They see this person that cares about me, no matter, you know, they're African American. I might be white, I might be brown, whatever. You know, I think we need more Black teachers. And I think in my career, I'm working on that in a lot of different arenas. I know people, you know, in Bayview that are working, Urban Academy, different schools that are working to bring and build pipelines for Black teachers. And so I think that is really, really important. Tell me the second part of the question again.
The second part was, how can they deepen their interaction with Black students?
Correct. First of all, to get to know themselves, what are your own biases? You know, before you hit a classroom, you've dealt with your biases that you have about children in general, but especially Black children. And brown children, right? You know, after you've been trained, what cultural competency training, bias, anti-bias, anti-racism training. You know, I think, you know, walking in, being a teacher who understands, like I go back to that same thing, who understands our children from not just that seat, but from their environment, is one that's going to help that child truly be successful. You know, curriculum that's not based on age-old European standards. You know, we need curriculum where Black children and brown children learn about their positive contributions to society, to American society. You know, that they weren't just brought here on ships. They built this country.
Yes.
They built this country. And so if they know that they're sitting in that chair, not as just a recipient, but they're sitting in that chair as a leader and as an advocate and as a developer, builder. We built this, we built that, we can continue to build. It changes that dynamic. And so teachers are critical in that capacity. Curriculum design and development, a pedagogy that is designed around uplifting, you know, children of color and their accomplishments and their own people. It doesn't take away, but why is everything based on a European ideology? You know, that's, you know, a lot of times kids fail in that, you know, because we haven't opened that up, and it's time to open it up. And I recommend a book, African Centered Education by Haki Madbuhutu. It's right here. It's a little thin book, but it talks about its importance in the development of Black children, a pedagogy that can help meet their needs and support their development mentally, physiologically, and socially in their environments. And so I just think it's about teachers and making sure that curriculums are based on real life situations and children and history.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. So I'm going to move us into our third set of questions. And that first one is, in your opinion, what is the biggest challenge in education?
Flipping the script. Honestly, flipping the script. We got 40, 50 years of data. And if we don't flip the script, we're going to have the next 40 to 50 years with no change. And the one-offs, you know, one or two getting out. We need populations to get out. We need population change, right? And so I firmly, that's what I believe. We got to flip the script. And we do that in many ways that I've talked about. We have to get deeper into communities. I remember a teacher, when I was a CEO of the San Francisco Education Fund, a teacher called me. She was new. coming into Bayview. She was working in one of the schools there, primarily African American Latino school. And she said, I want to get to know where these kids go to church. I want to know where they shop. And she was a young white teacher, and I no one had ever done that. She wanted to know how she can learn more about her students than just their name. And she's still there teaching right now. The grandmother knows them. She went to their church and introduced herself as, I'm the new teacher at this school. I want to get to know you all. You'll be hearing from me. I'm welcoming you into my class. It made a huge difference. She dealt with her own bias, she became culturally competent in that way. And so I thought that was just truly amazing. So we have to flip the script, and we have to encourage more of this sort of innovative thinking. And also technology, Rika, plays a big part of all. We're all virtual now, and you still see the disparity, right? So systems have to change, because if not, we're going to continue to go through this cycle, next 40 years sitting back. What do we do? Why didn't things change 40 years ago? We didn't change the policies. Everything is still based on what it was in the 1960s, 50s. Come on, let's flip the script.
Absolutely. You did share out how you kind of proposed to solve that. And so if you had the power to implement what you talked about, where would you begin?
I would begin 0 to 5. I would begin early on. I would, work with those early educators, pay them well, make sure that, we have culturally competent and anti-racist teachers teaching our kids at an early age. So when they get to 3rd grade, they're reading by 3rd grade, and they're going into kindergarten ready to learn, ready to play, ready to share what their own selves with the world, and move it upstream, and make sure that there's markers. You know how in the ocean, in the sea, or not sea, but in the bay, there's buoys. Mm-hmm. You got 115 feet from here, that there's buoys along the way. So no child is going to be in this big ocean of education that can't swim over to a buoy, and there's a person there, there's resources there, because we're going to fall. People are coming from different places. We need to have buoys all around this bay of education to make sure our kids don't fail. Mm-hmm. And when the buoys failed, we're in a situation, we don't have no buoys right now. There's nothing out there. So kids literally are falling through the cracks. And I'm not just speaking of California, I'm speaking of a lot of different places around this country for Black and brown children. And I just think we got to change. And so I'm doing that every day in my work. And I would definitely start further upstream. And that's why I am where I am.
Awesome. Thank you. And so for our last kind of set of questions, I would love for you to just share anything that you're doing to help others get involved in changing educational outcomes for Black children.
Wow. I'm working on some pipeline, new educators coming in. I call it a business incubator in my work. We're recruiting new educators to come in and be trained, get their license, open up their own business. They get business plans. We give them a small grant. They go out and open up a site for 12 kids. They the curriculum, all of that support is there. So this pipeline is a big part of it. Another part of building a new pipeline of teachers is with City College. In my personal life, I sit on the Southeast Community Facility Commission. I'm the chair of that commission, and they oversee the campus where City College is, and just working with them to figure out how do you reactivate this site so we can get some more programs, so we can start building in our own community. We shouldn't have to go weigh 6 buses to get education programs, to build teachers, early education programs. We need it here. So fighting on that front. I'm also part of Mega Black. It's a new coalition of organizational advocates, community leaders coming together to talk about the plight of African Americans in San Francisco, and how there's been, the years and the decades of trauma that have been ensued because of city government and policies, and how the city is really trying to right a wrong right now. And I am right at the table with that. So I run a food pantry at my church that's closed right now, but I did for 15 years. bottom of the hill, Hunters Point, the only one that's serving the predominantly African American people. Because it's important to me to not only lead, but to serve. Those two things go together for me. And serving the community, making sure people have their basic needs met around food, resources, again, putting buoys up so people can have places to go to get what they need so they're not falling through the cracks. So my life, I was the chair of the Human Rights Commission in Marin County for 4 years. I'm writing a dissertation about my people, about women coming out of poverty and how we can help, educate a whole bunch of young Black girls coming up with this map out of poverty that I'm hoping to put forth. So my life is committed to social justice. And I've always said, it's been empowerment. You empower people to advocate for themselves towards the social justice and the social change that they need to see. This is empowerment, advocacy, social justice, and social change. And that social change is policy, big P change, systems change. We have to have it. And so that's what I'm doing in my everyday life. And every now and then I work out. I'm a vegan and I try to take care of myself because I'm nothing if I don't take care of myself. So yeah, I got my mama's shoulders to stand on and a lot of others. And so I just want to elevate that and say thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell my story and what I think is important in the lives of Black children, Black education, and Black community. So thank you.
Thank you. And so I just want to lift up a couple of things that I heard as you were sharing out. I heard a lot, so I won't share them all, but I share a few. One that I heard around education was relationships over reform. So teachers taking the time to get to know the students and beyond just the name and the number and the test score, but actually getting to know our young people, knowing the traumas, knowing what they carrying as they come into our classrooms and helping them to actually heal from it. So thank you for sharing that. I also heard that schools need to create a culture of care, that when students come in, they should be hearing, how are you doing? And they should be hearing their names, somebody smiling at them, even if they're late, but still directing them to class. So I heard that happen in some of your educational experiences when the lady who was there to greet you in the
Every
morning.
day, yes.
And having worked in schools myself and as the receptionist had to greet people. And so knowing how that feels when people come in the door and just need a smile or a hello. So I heard that. I also heard you say, challenge yourself to master something. You said a lot around personal mastery, but I think that is one area that I try to push young people to, that, you can be great at a lot of things, but at least be good at something that when somebody calls on your expertise, you know it inside and out. And it's not just all these different things. So I appreciate you lifting that up. And then just one more I'll share out is there has to be a systems change and a population change. I think a lot of the work that you've done, that I've done, and many others in community have been Band-Aids on the bigger issues and these problems. Right. And so when I heard you say that systems change, I know that's what we really need to be moving toward and getting on one accord. I've heard about the work that Mega Black is doing, which I think is awesome. And then I'm connecting with as many other organizations doing the same thing. So I appreciate you sharing that. And so I thank you again for coming on. And if there's one last tip or piece of information that you want the viewers to hear, your voice is the last one that they will hear.
Just the parents, you are your child's primary teacher. And, we're here for you too. Parents can always go back, and I didn't get my degrees until I had all my kids. I was already in my career. I went back in 2003, got a BA, and then after that got a master's, and now I'm working on a PhD with grandkids. It's never too late to use education as a catalyst and to work on that if that's your goal. And I just think I want to lift you all up in COVID right now, what's going on, because you become teachers. You weren't planning on being teachers for your kids right now, but virtual learning is tough. I see my daughter-in-law, my son, it's tough, but I want to lift you all up and to say how much I appreciate what you're doing for your children. And if you ever need anything as far as childcare, resources, please reach out to the Children's Council, childrenscouncil.org. I want to make sure you know there is a place in San Francisco you can go. There's also a place in Bananas is in Oakland. Marin Children's Council is in Marin County. Every county has a Children's Council sort that's going to help you pay for your child care and get what you need, parenting, whatever. So just know we're here for you, and thank you.
Thank you.